Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Migrant Leaders Mentors. My name is Elham Fardad, and I am the founder and CEO of the charity Migrant Leaders. I'd like to start, first of all, by thanking each and every one of you for your continued support towards Migrant Leaders. Your mentoring with Migrant Leaders is the prime source of the value that our charity brings to the amazing young people we support. As you know, Migrant Leaders is the charity I launched 4 years ago after spending 23 years as a finance director in GE, News Corp, and EY. And it's been an amazing 4 years. Where we are today is we have 925 mentors from 95 FTSE and companies and big organizations from all sorts of fields and all walks of life, supporting our 900 mentees who are between 16 and 25, predominantly first and second generation young migrants, our mentees, and they are incredibly talented, and all of them have the potential to succeed. As you know, we also have corporate partnerships with companies such as Anglo American, Smith & Nephew, ABB, and Kantar, and over the last 3-4 years, we've been delivering with them continuously internships, workshops, training, opportunities, and connections that have landed our mentees in immensely important opportunities, graduate jobs, apprenticeships, and importantly, have helped them build relationships that later ensures their success in those companies and organizations. So today is really about training you and giving you information about safeguarding, which is something extremely important to our charity as we work with young people. There was a part 1 that we delivered a few weeks ago, and those of you who attended that know about that. And if you couldn't attend that one, it's okay. There was a recording that you could see, and we publicized that. This is now part 2, which you should find a little bit less legislative and compliance related and a bit more migrant leaders and application related as a general rule. We have the privilege of welcoming once again Kate Meredith from the NSPCC, who is an expert in safeguarding and with whom we have been working with, and Fawzia particularly has been working very hard with Kate in preparing this seminar for you. So without further ado, I am actually going to pass to Fawzia, who will lead on this conference today.
Thanks very much, Elham. Well, I mean, just a brief word from me to say welcome to everybody. And I really hope that you find this presentation, which will be mostly led by Kate, on the some of the practicalities of applying our policy and procedure on safeguarding. And we'll be going through some scenario discussions. We'll have breakout rooms for you to discuss those. And really, it's about potential situations that you might be dealing with and to help you work out how to handle those. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Fawzia. Thank you very much, Elham. And I'd like to add my thanks to all of you for being present at the session today. It's a wonderful thing to see that Migrant Leaders is an organisation that takes safeguarding so seriously, and that you as individual mentors take it so seriously that you're prepared to give up your time to come to this session. So I really appreciate that very much. We are, as has been said, we're going to try and make this this session a little more interactive where we can, although we do have quite a lot to get through. So bear with us as we kind of crack on with that. But I think I do need to be sharing with you some slides as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask for, actually, no, I don't need to ask Fawzia because I can share my own screen, can't I? So I shall just do that with you now and make sure that you can all see these slides. So can you see these slides okay? Sounds like you can, so that's really great. Okay, so as we said, this is the second half of the session that we began in January. And this session, we're particularly looking at what are the safeguarding responsibilities that mentors have, and thinking about that in more detail. Just a little bit about housekeeping. I'm sure you are all extremely familiar with using Zoom and everything to do with using Zoom these days, so I won't go through all this in detail. We will try and have a very short break before we get onto the case scenarios in the session, but if you need to step away from the session for whatever reason, then please feel free to do that, and please don't worry if you just need to get a little bit of space away from your screen, or do whatever you need to do to be comfortable. We are going to be using the chat function, but also we're going to be using the annotate function as well on some of the slides. So I hope that you feel comfortable and able to participate in that. And we're going to be using breakout rooms as well. You get a 2-minute warning, as you probably know, before the breakout rooms close. So when you see that 2 minutes popping up, then do be winding up your discussion. And if you can also try and make sure that there is somebody that you identify in your breakout room who will be able to, on behalf of the group, feedback a little bit of what your discussion has been. That would be fantastic. And also just to say that I hope that you've all managed to receive your course books for today. You will be needing the course books because they have material in that we will be using in the breakout room. So they have the case scenarios in, for example. So if you could possibly make sure that you can either see those on your screen, or even better, if you've managed to print out the case scenarios, that would be fantastic too. And you're also going to need something to write with, so a pen and some paper to write with, or you can use the notes pages in your course book if you've got it printed off. A quick little note to say that safeguarding can be an emotive subject, as we all know. It can affect us even when we think we're not going to be affected. So if you do feel affected or this session raises any issues for you, then do please make sure that you look after yourselves. I've put the NSPCC helpline in there that you can use to contact us if you are worried about a child or young person. And also, of course, migrant leaders have their own very, very good support network for mentors. So please feel free to use that if you need to. A very simple and straightforward learning agreement that I'm sure you'll have used before. The only thing that I'm really going to pick out from that is the issue about respecting confidentiality. I would like people to feel free to be able to talk as they need to in this session, in the breakout rooms and so on. But clearly, if we become aware of any situation where we think that anybody is at risk, anybody that is being discussed is at risk, then we will need to pick that up with you and think about how we can take that forward to make sure that that people are protected. NSPCC is very committed to trying to implement principles of equality and diversity and inclusion in all the work we do. And I hope that this translates itself into the session that we have today. We would love to have feedback from you about whether you feel that is the case. And certainly if you feel it isn't the case, then we would particularly like to know that from you so that we can make sure that we improve our practice all the time. So moving on to the aims of today, we're particularly looking at your safeguarding responsibilities and helping you to develop competence and confidence in fulfilling this aspect of your very important role. This is our second session, so we're looking at the objectives towards the bottom of that screen. So we're thinking particularly how you might recognise a possible safeguarding concern in your mentoring role, the steps that you need to take in order to respond to a concern that you might have about a young person in your role as a mentor, including the responsibility to record your concerns, how to maintain professional boundaries. We talked about that at the last session, but we will continue to refer to it in this session as well. And we're going to be looking at some resources and sources of support for you with your safeguarding responsibilities. That's our programme. I won't go into that in detail. It's just to say that that's where we've got to get to by 6 o'clock. So there's a lot to do. Okay. But first of all, we would like to just very quickly run a quick poll about what your experience might already be around safeguarding concerns. So it's a really, really simple poll. It's anonymized, so we won't know what who it is who's contributing a particular answer. So if you can just really quickly answer that for us, we'll just give you a moment to do that. Thank you very much, Fawzi, for doing that. So it's really just to see if you've ever been in the position of having to deal with a safeguarding concern at work or through volunteering. So I think we've got 100% of people answering, so that's wonderful. And yeah, we have it's really split really. We have 60% of people who have had experience of dealing with a safeguarding concern at work, and 40% who as yet have not had the experience of having to do that. So so thank you very much, Fawzi, for that. Perhaps we should people, as long as people have had a chance to see that. Yeah. Okay, so perhaps if we close that poll now.
Has it disappeared from your screen?
No, it's still on my screen at the moment. Yeah, I'll try and close it. There we are. It's disappeared off my screen. Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be an easier thing for the people who have had this experience to answer. But the next question really is about what that experience was like for you. And if you haven't as yet had the experience of having to respond to a safeguarding concern, maybe you can think about what your feelings are about having to do that in the future. And if you would rather use emojis, you can certainly use emojis. So you can either use the chat box to maybe just single words or short phrases to either describe what that experience was like, or if as yet you haven't had the opportunity to, I don't know if opportunity is the right word, if as yet you haven't had to respond to a safeguarding concern, how you feel about doing that. So do feel free to add any little notes on the slide itself using the annotate function. Do people know how to do that? You can see, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see that there's a little pencil that says annotate. And if you click on that, it then gives you the option of how you can annotate, whether you want to type or whether you just want to write. So if you just put type, and then you can type in something directly onto the screen. I'll just give you a few moments to do that. Oh, thank you very much, Lucia, for putting something there. Romi's putting something as well. Thank you. And Ian's adding something for us as well.
I'm just going to step in, Kate. If you can't see the annotate option at the bottom of your screen, try at the top and it says view options. Excellent, Julia's found it.
That's great.
If you click on the options, yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. So we're getting some answers and some responses to that now. Yeah. So one of the answers is I feel I have enough support to identify the best approach to address safeguarding issues. So that's great. That's wonderful that that you felt that. Yeah, someone saying it was really tricky in the moment. Yes, in the moment it can feel, oh my goodness, this is really happening now. I've got to do something. Yeah, people saying that they were well supported. So that's fantastic. Yeah, someone saying that it was daunting to face that conversation at the time, but but you were able to step in and take responsibility for that. So that's fantastic. Yeah, so really some very positive responses there, which is amazing. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, people talking about the depth of responsibility they felt. It could feel quite pressured for people. Yeah, quite concerning for people. And I don't know, are there any other comments in the chat, Fawzia, that anyone has put in there?
No, just the practical help on how to find the annotate function.
Yeah, thank you for offering that help. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for doing that. I think before I move on, I need to erase those answers, which is a shame, really. I shall do that. Yeah, and then. Okay, so if you can again then think back to those experiences that you've been referring to, or what potentially you might have to be dealing with in the future. If it was a positive experience, maybe you can say again really briefly about what were the positive things about it. People have already referred to the support that they received in doing that. Maybe you could say a little bit more about what was it about that support? Was it that you could get hold of someone really quickly to know what to do, or was it about an opportunity to debrief afterwards, or whatever? And if it felt like a really hard experience, then are there things that might have helped you and to make it less hard, to make it something that felt more manageable, a little bit easier? I'll just give you a few moments again to contribute to that. Again, if it's a problem using Annotate, then do just pop things in the chat. That would be that's fine too. Or Julia's putting something in here. Yeah, and Paul as well. Thank you. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Okay. So so lots of things in the positive side, which is just amazing. Often when I'm running training on safeguarding, everybody is saying, "Oh, it's so difficult," and I just don't know how I don't know how I would deal with it, or I just found it very frustrating because there wasn't support around or whatever. But it's just really, really encouraging, and I hope it's encouraging as well for Fawzia and for Elham to see this, that actually people do feel positive about it. People are talking about the training that was provided, that there was a clear policy, that there were clear communications and a supportive peer group. Yeah, so obviously these might be experiences that are from outside migrant leaders, because I do appreciate that so many of you have very rich experiences professionally and as volunteers. But yeah, it just shows what makes a difference, really, doesn't it? That whole thing about support, about training, about knowing what you have to do. Yeah. So I hope that actually helps people to feel that, you know, this is something that you can do. It's not it can be really daunting, and it is daunting. It is a very heavy responsibility, but actually it can be done. It's not something that we need to be afraid of. Yeah. Awareness. Yes, that's yes, that issue about awareness, how to know that that what you're looking at is potentially a safeguarding concern. Yeah, that it's something that can happen, and we need to acknowledge that it can happen. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on a little bit from there now. So at the NSPCC, when we think about safeguarding responsibilities around specific concerns about children, young people, or about adults, we use this idea of the 4 stages of responsibility. It's a little aid memoir that we use really to help us with that, and we call them the 4 R's. And some of these R's are have actually found their way into your migrant leaders safeguarding policy and procedures, which is really encouraging because it shows that actually we speak in the same language here. So that's really helpful. And so what we're going to do as we're working our way through this issue about responding to safeguarding concerns is we're going to use this idea of the 4 R's to help us structure our framework for our response. And so the first one of those R's, as we've seen already, is around recognizing signs and indicators of abuse. And very often what we can notice is that there can be a little cluster of signs. Often it's not just one thing. It can be like maybe a little cluster of different things that it could be. And it could be something that a child or a young person tells you. It could be something that an adult tells you about a child or a young person or about themselves. It might be a physical sign, an injury or something like that. It might be a behavioural sign, something that you see a young person doing or not doing, or that you see an adult doing or not doing. So it could be something that you see happening offline when you're encountering a young person. It could be something that you see happening online. So yeah, all sorts of different things really. What we often say is that issue about a changes in how a young person interacts, or a young person's habits, or a young person's appearance is the really significant thing for us to be thinking about. Which means that obviously the better we know our mentees, then the more able we are to pick up on changes. And sometimes it's not even anything particularly tangible. Sometimes it might just be a feeling and you're not quite sure where that feeling is coming from. And what you need to do is just have a little bit of time to reflect on it and to talk it through with somebody and say, look, there's just something I'm just not quite comfortable about in terms of how things are with such and such a person, and I need to talk it through. So these concerns can present themselves in all sorts of different ways, and those of you who have had to deal with concerns around safeguarding will be only too aware of this, really. So what migrant leaders policy says about recognizing is that, well, it says really helpful things, and the bits that I've highlighted here are bits that I just wanted to draw your attention to. The issues can often be complex, and they can often overlap, and there's an example there about overlapping issues that sometimes come together, and also the focus on online activity. What we're finding more and more within NSPCC is that online activity can be used as a way in which abusers groom young people. There can be online activity is a way in which peer-on-peer abuse can sometimes happen. And also online activity is something that often it's a lot harder for anyone else to be aware of. It's often very hidden from anybody other than the young person who is experiencing it. Online bullying, all different kinds of things can happen online, and perpetrators and abusers are finding now that actually being able to take advantage of technology, unfortunately, is enabling them to find all sorts of ways of continuing to abuse young people. So it's something that we really do need to be alert to, and we need to be mindful of. So a few more thoughts about recognizing signs and indicators of abuse. We need to think about the barriers that young people face in speaking out. We talked about that at our last session. We need to recognise that abuse can happen in all sorts of contexts, in all sorts of places. It can happen at home, it can happen in relationships, and in the many different environments where young people spend time. And in our last session, we thought a little bit about contextual safeguarding and what the messages and learning from that about the different places in which young people can spend time. And that might be time in the online space as well as in the offline. So we need to think about online space as being another context where abuse can happen. Some young people can be particularly vulnerable. All young people might unfortunately experience abuse. Any young person can experience abuse, unfortunately, but we know that some young people or young people at particular stages and points in their lives might be particularly vulnerable. And again, your own migrant leaders policy has some really good content about some of the things that can make young people particularly vulnerable at particular stages in their lives or in particular circumstances. And I think also we need to remember that it's very unlikely that one organisation or one person would be able to witness all the signs and indicators of abuse in a young person. Usually what we might see a little cluster of signs and indicators, as we've said already, but really they're quite likely just to be the little tips of the iceberg, little bits of the jigsaw, which is why it's so important for us not to wait until we're certain before we actually start acting and before we start referring situations on. Because if we refer to an investigating authority, such as the local authority or the police, it might be that they have other information that actually adds to the information that we are providing for them, and actually what we're helping to do is complete that picture that that investigating authority needs in order to be able to take some action. So yeah, important to remember that, really. And also that there is a lot of information about possible signs and indicators, but very few of those signs and indicators are themselves diagnostic of abuse. They might be about other things. They might be suggestive of abuse, but it wouldn't be possible to say that because of a particular sign or indicator, that young person is definitely being abused. And what we need to remember is it's not our job to decide whether that young person is being abused or not. It's our job to notice things that concern us and then to pass that information on. It's not for us to be investigating. There are some common universal signs, which I'm not going to go through now, that aren't related necessarily to specific types of abuse. And there's a lot more information about signs and indicators in your course book. And also there's some information in your safeguarding policy for migrant leaders. So yeah, so take time to have a look through those and to see what you think about those, really. And also just to know where that information is, so that if you're faced with a situation where you're thinking, oh, I don't know what I think about this, that can actually help you to process your thoughts a little bit. And again, remember that most of the signs and indicators and characteristics that we're talking about might be unconnected to abuse. They might be to do with something else altogether, and that a young person might be being abused and actually not show any of these signs and indicators at all. So although they're helpful, they're only helpful kind of up to a point. So what I'd like you to do now, really, as we approach the end of this section, is just very quickly, just yourself individually, to think about what might be some of the signs and indicators that you might expect in one or more of these situations here. Say you wanted to think particularly about that first situation, a 14-year-old at risk of being sexually exploited. What might be some of the signs and indicators that you might observe if that were to be the case? So just take a few minutes now just to note those down yourself, and then we'll just have a very quick discussion about them. I know you've not had very long, but I'm going to stop you there so that we can maybe just share some thoughts that people might have. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so that I can see you. Yeah. So would anybody, if you'd like to offer any suggestions about any of those tiny little snippets of scenarios that you've seen there, if you'd like to offer some suggestions about what we might notice if that were going on, if one of those things was going on for a young person, would you like to share any of that?
Yeah, Lucia here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lucia.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind pretty much on all of the scenarios is somebody maybe displaying a bit of withdrawn behavior.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I think about somebody that might be abused, then there might be also fear of being alone or not having somebody there that they can rely on and keeping them company in case there is a situation where they feel exceptionally vulnerable.
Yes, yes. When we think of the burden of living with that, how isolating that can feel for a young person, it's a really terrible thing to bear, isn't it? It's a terrible thing for even an older person to carry. And we know that sense of isolation, that impact on the young person's emotional well-being, and how it can interfere with them just being able to do what we would all want young people to be able to do, just get on with their lives and enjoy their lives and do well and fulfill their potential. Abuse can just be like a sort of a dead hand really upon them that actually can really make that very hard. Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Any other thoughts that anyone has about any of those possible scenarios that we looked at there? Paul. Yeah.
Hi, Kate. I think the reverse signs could also be evident as well, in as much as in a 14-year-old at risk, you might see evidence of inappropriate or more mature language or behavior or dress than you might expect, because they may already be being approached or being groomed in some way to demonstrate those behaviors. So in addition to the obvious things of introversion and so on, there might be quite extrovert signs that would indicate they might be at risk in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that really is an illustration of what we've been saying, isn't it? That actually, it might be one thing, it might be absolutely the opposite of that. You can't say that a particular behavior definitely means this or a particular behavior definitely means that. And what we know about young people who are sexually exploited is that the way in which they are groomed for that exploitation is often by isolating them from their families and their previous peer groups and friendship groups, but actually I suppose entrapping them within another more sinister group of contacts. But for the young person, what that looks like is something really exciting, something really grown up, all something really glamorous, all fancy new clothes or presents or all of these kinds of things. So absolutely, yeah. So it's just really, really hard to tell. But I suppose the more we can get to know our mentors and get to know what is normal for them, then the more we can be tuned into behaviors and things that actually are a change that we might be concerned about. Yeah, thank you very much. Any other thoughts, anybody, about
Kate? Yeah, Kate, I'd just like to talk about the two older examples that you gave of somebody being at risk of financial exploitation or an older person being at risk of abuse. And the sorts of signs that I would look out for or that I've become aware of is actually, in terms of financial exploitation, an individual not having any control over their finances and not being allowed to operate their finances independently. So perhaps not even going to a cash point on their own, always being accompanied by somebody, whoever their, I want to say controller, but whoever is controlling them, not allowing them to have independence or decision-making powers over their own finances. And I know that there's a concept of cuckooing, isn't there, where basically somebody's life and space, their environment, is taken over potentially by criminals who then basically take over their finances and their environment for their own benefit, and remove that person's independence. So whilst that person is functioning, they're not actually in control of their own life, their own finances, or their own independence. And in terms of an older person being at risk of abuse, again, that quite often it's where that person isn't able to make their own decisions and isn't able to operate independently. So especially when you have coercive control, for example, you'll find that, and it's usually women, but they're not able to do anything independently, even down to their choice of dress or food or activities. So hopefully these are examples that I've come across through my work, but that we don't come across through our lives day to day, but they are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Fawzia. Really interesting and helpful thoughts there about how financial exploitation and abuse within the context of an intimate relationship might show themselves, really. Very concerning. This idea that actually, you know, that actually this person should have financial means. They should have money. They shouldn't be in debt, or they shouldn't not have any money at all. And actually, yes, what we're seeing is that actually their financial resources are basically being controlled by somebody else. And similarly within some abusive relationships as well, this idea that the person has absolutely no independence or control over their life, that actually that's been taken over. Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
If I may also add a topic that comes up sometimes among our mentees. As you may know, I've been going around the country, both physically and online, talking to a lot of young people across the country and telling them about migrant leaders and hearing from them about their challenges. And something that occasionally comes up is clear, coercive and controlling behavior from their own families. Some of them are told that despite offers from top universities, that they are categorically not allowed to go to university, that they have to stay within their communities, that they have no means to have any independence. And I think it's worth talking about that and the context of some of our mentees, and some of the observations and wisdom that you might be able to share with us, Kate.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. I mean, that is certainly something that we come across as well, and unfortunately, sometimes the way that it's presented is, well, this is how it is in our culture. You know, we don't allow things like this in our community. This isn't something that is that we think is right. We want to protect this person and we want to make sure that they're safe, and that means that they have to stay here at home, and they shouldn't be going and striking out and having an independent life at this stage. And that can be really hard to deal with, isn't it? Because we want to be respectful of people's cultural values. We want to be respectful of people's people's own beliefs about things, but at the same time thinking about what that actually means for the young person themselves and what their experience of that is, and trying to listen to that and hear that, and support them in that kind of way, really, I think is difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to move us on because of needing to progress through the different R's. So we've done recognizing. So now we're going to be thinking about responding. So I'm going to share my screen a little bit again with you. So responding. So we have reached the stage where we have a concern that a young person may be at risk of abuse. So what should our response be? I think another thing that really is very good about your migrant leaders policy and procedures is that you actually there are very clear steps that you are asked to take, and where that starts is in the immediate response that you might give to a young person, assuming that the concern comes in the form of a disclosure from that young person themselves. So I just wanted to just remind you about those. So these are really, yes, these are taken directly from your own safeguarding policies. This list of do's and don'ts, really. And I'm sure that many of you will have seen something similar before, perhaps in other work that you've done. And rather than going through all of those now, I just wanted to ask you whether there were any of those that surprised you, and whether there were any others that you might want to add to that list. So again, I'll just give you a minute or so just to read through them. And yes, any surprises or anything else that you might want to add to that list. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see if you're raising your hand or anything like that, but I know that Forgia can see. So Forgia, if you see anybody raising their hand or wanting to say something, could you ask them to speak?
Maybe you can read it aloud, because somebody says they are, for example, accessing it from phone or can't see the screen. So maybe it also helps people to add some points here.
Can I just jump in? So the promise not to tell anyone is tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes they will actually qualify what they're telling you by saying, you promise, I'm only going to tell you this if you promise not to tell anyone. I agree with it, but we need to be quite careful in how we respond to that point, which maybe you're going to come on to later.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Ian, wasn't it? Thank you for that, Ian. Yes, and I think the policy recognises that it's really hard, isn't it? Because sometimes a young person might have sort of launched into what it is that they need to say before you've had an opportunity to say, oh, I just need to tell you this. And actually you don't want to stop them in full flow, or that can feel like the wrong thing to do, and it's a really, really hard thing to manage sometimes. One of the things that we often say to people is that actually it can really help if before you even ever get into that situation, if you at the beginning of a relationship with a mentee, when you're sort of basically just kind of doing that little bit of contracting and getting to know each other through introducing yourselves to each other and how you're going to work together, that is something that you talk about really early on, that you say, just one of the things that I need to share with you is about the way in which we need to work in migrant leaders around confidentiality. And most of the time we can respect your privacy and confidence, but there might be times when we can't, and I just need to let you know. And even though that might not prevent a situation where someone tells you something that they don't want you to share and you have to share, at least if you've actually had that discussion in the first place before it's reached a kind of a sort of a really difficult point, then it can sort of set that, it can kind of do the groundwork for you a little bit. And that can really help. I can see that other people have been raising their hands as well. So has anybody got any thoughts on that particular point?
Julia, apologies, Lucia. Julia raised the point about, she had her hand up and she's raised the point in the chat. Will there be a script in terms of what we can say to the mentees?
We've made a couple of suggestions about what to say to mentees. It's essentially about allowing them to speak. It's the difficult situation. The difficult timing is when chipping in once you've allowed that young person to speak. There's a decision to be made about not stopping that young person from sharing, but at the same time not putting them off, so not putting them off from sharing that information, but equally don't put them in the situation where they feel they've shared something that they wouldn't have shared if they had known that you would have had to pass that information on. So it is a little bit of a tricky situation. You have to kind of use your judgment about that, your best endeavours. But I do think that we can't provide a script for every situation. So we've got a couple of examples, but I think the key is to use open-ended questions. And not to criticise and not to admonish. So, all this thing about, I wish you told me earlier, or and really not asking them to expand beyond what they want to tell you initially. It's about gently coaxing, really. Lucia, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. So if you're in a situation where you perceive and you have a strong feeling that this young person wants to share something, but is just trying to decide whether do it or not, is it appropriate to not lead the question, but encourage them to feel like, is there anything you like to talk about or something bothering you, or would that be pushing boundaries?
Shall I respond to that? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Lucia, I think from my point of view, if you sense that there is something going on for that young person, then I think it is absolutely the right thing to say, are you all right? Is there something that you want to talk about? I think that is putting oneself in the shoes of that young person, and what we know about why young people tell the people they tell, and all the internal thinking that they actually go through in order to make the decision to say something. Yeah. It isn't something that normally happens just by chance. It isn't something that happens without them usually having given it a great deal of thought. So actually, if they do say something, even if at the time there's a lot of them that doesn't want you to pass that information on, then particularly if you've prepared them in advance, they know that is what you're going to have to do, and they in a sense generally there's a level at which they are accepting that. And for you then to say, you remember what we've talked about before, that if there's something where we come to feel that that you might be at risk, then we need to do something to try and make that stop. Then even if it's really hard for them at the time, then young people, I think, appreciate that is what has to happen, and they know that is what is going to happen. And I think we can burden ourselves with worry, thinking, oh no, this young person has somehow or other out of the blue just blurted something out. That does happen occasionally, but not really that often. Normally the young person knows exactly what they're doing, and they know, and they've chosen you to tell. And what you need to do is actually honor the contract that you already have with them and say, okay, so we need to do this hard thing now, and we need to pass this information on. And that's what I would encourage you to do. Yeah. I can see two people have got their hands raised at the moment, but I don't know who they are.
Julia's been waiting to say something for a while.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, in terms of having a script or something, done coaching and things like that before, I usually start that relationship off with the script of, everything's confidential unless, I feel like you're going to harm yourself, or somebody's harming you. And in that case, I'm going to have to tell you, so you don't have to interrupt in those conversations. And I guess it would be great if at every beginning of every relationship or every mentoring relationship, we had that sort of script to follow that would be standardized across whoever we work with, especially considering the people where they're coming from in this type of they might be vulnerable. So just thinking about that, it would be good to just have that, so we don't have to, like you say, interfere in that flow.
Yeah, that's really helpful and interesting feedback, Julia. Thank you. And I guess that's something for us to reflect on, and for migrant leaders to reflect on, about whether there is even more that they could do to support you with that, in addition to what they already have. So yeah, thank you. I am going to move us on. Again,
Kate, before
sorry.
you do that, Rob wanted to say something.
Rob,
just before you
sorry.
move on.
Yeah, beg your pardon, Rob.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, thanks. Hi, this is Rob. I was just interested in the don't column, the share personal experiences. I guess that's meaning if you've got experience of, you know, something very serious that's happened and you wouldn't want to make it about you, it would be, you know, about your mentee. But is there any flexibility there with, say, for example, your mentee is struggling at university, they're finding it difficult to cope with exams, and you can sort of give a little bit of your background and you can empathize with them, and that would be kind of sharing personal experiences. I just wondered what the flexibility with that point is.
Sure. Well, Rob, I think what we're talking about here, these do's and don'ts, are specific to a situation where a young person is disclosing abuse, and where you're saying, oh, you know, that's happened to you. Well, actually, you know, the same thing happened to me, and blah blah blah, and that can not normally be a helpful thing for a young person to hear at that time. Whereas if actually you're talking about how hard it can be sometimes being at university and making friends, or coping with the academic side of things, or being away from your family or whatever, and you say something that helps the young person to recognize that, you know, that's a really common thing, and that even someone, say, in your position, who actually kind of managed to continue with it and came out the other end and it was fine, it can be really helpful for people to know that. So I wouldn't want to say that you should never share personal experiences, but I think it's just about when you do that and why you do that. And I think if the reason why you're doing that is because you take the view that it's really going to be something that young person, that would help that young person at that point. It would help them to feel that they're not alone. It would help them to feel that actually they can deal with this. It would help them to feel there isn't something intrinsically wrong with them. But I think to start sharing personal experiences that you might have, as you said, Rob, about something traumatic, and you interject with that at a time when a young person is wanting to tell you something that is really painful and difficult for them to tell, that's quite a risky thing to do, because the danger is that it then starts becoming about you. So I think that would be why I wouldn't think that it would be a particularly helpful thing to do at that point when the young person's disclosing abuse. But in more general conversation, then it might be a really helpful thing to do.
Agreed. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on a little? I'm so sorry that we have to rush some of these things. Okay, a few other do's and don'ts from me, really. I'm not going to go through all of these. You will get these slides after the session. We can send you a PDF version of the slides. Yeah, so and these are also things that are mainly included in your migrant leaders policy as well. The last one about not putting yourself at risk. Yeah, you know, keep yourselves safe at all times, really, in your work with migrant leaders, because if you I think because of the kind of people that you are, because you're really committed to young people, it can be easy for that to start affecting your own mental health, or your own emotional well-being as well. So be safe. Yeah. So anyway, so you're concerned. What happens next? Again, your safeguarding policy is really, really helpful, really simple. It's just about making a record of your concerns. Migrant Leaders has a really, really good incident form you to include the information that needs to be included. But if you don't have that to hand, just make some notes on something, type something, scribble some notes, and then transfer them to the form at your earliest opportunity. The sooner you can actually get something recorded, the better, and we'll come on to that in a few moments. report your concern to the DSL as soon as possible and on the same day that it is raised. And the DSL is yourself, isn't it, Portia?
It is.
Yep. So report to Forsia. And the request from migrant leaders is that you actually phone Forsia first and say, this has happened, this has come up, there's something I need to be telling you about, and then send the report so that she knows to expect the report, and send it by a secure email, say with password protected, and give her the password as well, I would suggest. And then there'll be a conversation really about what the next steps are going to be. Portia, do you want to say anything about that process and about how anything that you would want to add to those basic steps that are in the procedure there?
To be honest, I don't think there's a great deal to add. All I would say is you all have my telephone number. It's at the bottom of all of my emails to you. So do, as Kate said, do call and let me know, alert me, so that if it's late in the evening or whatever, I'm going to be able to pick up the emails. Don't worry about contacting me. If there is a safeguarding concern, then it's important, and so you need to be able to get hold of me.
Thank you, Forsia. Very sensibly, the policy also mentions the rare eventuality where you might be in a situation where you have a concern about someone else who works for migrant leaders, or you have a concern about a colleague, and equally those are things that need to be reported as well, and not to hold back from doing that. Migrant Leaders does have a whistleblowing policy. Excuse me, I'm just going to go and close this door here because my husband's on another line. Hold on 1 second.
It's probably worth reminding everyone that all our policies, procedures and forms are in our digital zone on our Migrant Leaders website. So you will find our whistleblowing policy, our incident form, safeguarding policy, mentors guide, all of those things in the digital zone on our website, migrantleaders.org.uk.
Thank you. Yeah, and they are very good and comprehensive and accessible, and yeah. And this is no sort of personal comment on Elham or Forsia, but clearly we always say that if the concern that you might have is about the DSL themselves or about the chief executive themselves, then obviously you wouldn't go to them with the concern, and actually the policy says what should happen if that were to be the case. So so it's all charitable organisations are required to make sure that there is real kind of objectivity and transparency around reporting safeguarding concerns, and to ensure that the leadership within an organisation is not able to quash concerns or sit on concerns. And that's really come to the fore much more in the last few years, because of this was exactly what was happening in some organisations. And say the church, for example, was seen as being somewhere where that was happening, but not just the church, other organisations as well. So that's why organisations have to have that kind of arrangement in place. Yeah. Okay, so really simple procedure. Hopefully everyone's okay with that and knows what they should be doing. And as has already been said, there needs to be a recording made, a record made of the concern that is accurate and timely. And as we've said, the form that is in the procedure is a really helpful form, and it helps you to capture the information that you need. But we want to look a little bit more deliberately at the process and the task of recording. And I wondered if any of you would like to guess what research and science tells us about how long we can store new information in our working memory. Anybody want to have a bit of a guess about how long they think we can store that information for? Oh, you're all keeping quiet on that one. Yeah. Well, it isn't very long. This is what Goldstein says in 2010. It's around 10 to 15 seconds, really, really temporary. And after that time, unless there's some reinforcement or something that happens to really help us to retain that memory, then after that period, it starts to degrade. It doesn't necessarily vanish altogether, but it starts to degrade, and it starts to disappear. It starts to fade. So what we really need to be taking from that is that we really do need to be recording as soon as we can. And I thought what might be quite fun would be to do a little experiment here in the session. And I thought what I might do is to read an account out to you, and then for you not to make any notes at all while you're listening to it. And then we just talk about something else for a bit. And then we come back and ask you to make a record of it. And we'll see how whether that is in fact true and how much of that record we can remember after a little while. So are you up for that? Shall we have a go at that? I shall stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so as I say, try not to make any notes now. I know it can be really tempting, but try not to make any notes and just listen. And I'm only going to read it out once, and it will probably take me about a minute and a half to read it out. Okay, so are you ready? So this is a diary entry by Iris Origo, dated the 30th of January, 1943. And this is what she says. The first refugee children have arrived. They were due yesterday evening at 7 after a 12 hours journey from Genoa. But it was not until 9 p.m. that at last the car drew up and 7 very small, sleepy bundles were lifted out. The eldest is 6, the others 4 and 5, all girls except one, a solemn little Sardinian called Dante Porcu. We carry them down into the playroom of the nursery school where the stove is burning and supper waiting, and they stand blinking in the bright light like small bewildered owls, white pasty faces, several with boils and sores, and thin little sticks of arms and legs. The Genoese district nurse who has brought them tells me that they have been chosen from families whose houses have been totally destroyed, and who for the last 2 months have been living in an underground tunnel beneath the city, without light or sufficient water, and in bitter cold. Their fathers are mostly dock labourers. 2 of them have been killed. The children eat their warm soup, still too bewildered fully to realise where they are. And then, as they gradually thaw and wake up, the first wail goes up. Mama, Mama, I want my mama. We hastily produce the toys which we have prepared for just that moment. The little girls clutch their dolls. Dante winds up his motor. And for a few minutes, tears are averted. Then we take them upstairs and tuck them up in their warm beds. Homesickness sets in again, and 2 of them, poor babies, cry themselves to sleep. So quite a graphic record of what happened on that occasion. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to park that for the moment, and we're going to come back to it very shortly. But in the meantime, let's have a look at some general rules about creating a good record. So we've talked about using the form provided by migrant leaders, and we've talked about the need to keep the record factual. If possible, to use the language and form of expression used by the young person themselves. And if you record opinion, being clear about whose opinion it is. If it's your own opinion, then give reasons and evidence to support your view. And if you don't know something that is asked for on the form, don't guess it, just say that you don't know. If you're reporting hearsay, state that this is the case and try to be accurate about personal information. And then try and process the record in line with the data protection requirements, keeping it secure, for example, making sure that you pass it on within the time limit set out. And if you've made contemporaneous notes, say that you haven't had the form with you, which you might very well not have, and you wanted to make some immediate notes, then talk to Forgier about what to do with those notes once you've transferred them onto the form, and whether they should be destroyed, in which case they need to be securely destroyed, or whether they should, for the moment, be kept, just in case they're needed in the future. So, so those are just some general ideas about creating a good record. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or reflections about what is involved in making such a record. Okay. So let's go back to that exercise. What I'd like you to do is to take a few minutes to make a record of the account that you heard me read a few moments ago. Let's have a look at the time. I'm just going to check the time. Yeah, so I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that. So anything that you can remember, any and everything that you can remember about that, that account that I read out, write it down. And then I'm going to read the account again, and you can give yourselves a mark out of 10 as to how well you think you've done. Okay, is that okay? Okay, everyone, thank you very much for doing that. I'm going to read out the account again, and then you can see how much of it you managed to capture and how much you forgot. I realise it's there's a lot of information in there. It's quite a complex account really, but there we are. Okay, so this is a diary entry by Iris Origo, dated the 30th of January 1943. The first refugee children have arrived. They were due yesterday evening at 7 after a 12 hours journey from Genoa, but it was not until 9 p.m. that at last the car drew up and 7 very sleepy small bundles were lifted out. The eldest is 6, the others 4 and 5, all girls except one, a solemn little Sardinian called Dante Porcu. We carried them down into the playroom of the nursery school, where the stove is burning and supper waiting, and they stand blinking in the bright light, like small bewildered owls. White, pasty faces, several with boils and sores, and thin little sticks of arms and legs. The Genoese district nurse who has brought them tells me that they have been chosen from families whose houses have been totally destroyed, and who for the last 2 months have been living in an underground tunnel beneath the city, without light or sufficient water, and in bitter cold. Their fathers are mostly dock labourers. 2 of them have been killed. The children eat their warm soup, still too bewildered fully to realise where they are. And then as they gradually thaw and wake up, the first wail goes up. Mama, Mama, I want my mama. We hastily produce the toys which we have prepared for just that moment. The little girls clutch their dolls. Dante winds up his motor, and for a few minutes tears are averted. Then we take them upstairs and tuck them up in their warm beds. Homesickness sets in again, and 2 of them poor babies cry themselves to sleep. So it is quite an affecting account, isn't it? And I just wanted to acknowledge that, really. Yeah, so thank you for listening to it, and I hope that you were all right with listening to that. So in terms of how you got on with the recording it, if you'd like to give yourselves a mark out of 10, then we can see how you got on. I wouldn't have liked to have been given that task myself, I have to say, because it is quite a lot. So I know it's not a very objective way of scoring things, but did anybody score over 5? Did anybody give themselves more than 5? Okay. Oh, Paul, well done, Paul. Excellent. What did you give yourself, Paul?
Excuse me, dropped my earphone. It was a 6 nearly. I mean, it's a very rough count, but 5, 6 maybe. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, well done. And all of you, I mean, I think nobody could possibly have got anywhere near 10 for that. So anything that you managed to remember, any details, then a big well done to all of you. Any thoughts about that exercise? Any thoughts about any learning from that exercise, or how that exercise felt for you, making a record of something that is quite a moving thing, quite, I mean, we leave the children in a safe place, but clearly there's so much grief there for them. And also when we're making a record of safeguarding concerns, it can be a hard thing to do at an emotional level as well as everything else. So any thoughts or reflections from any of you about what we've just done?
It's fascinating how the brain works, and it's so much of our perceptual is visual. And I think when you're a writer or a reader, you're really trying to generate an image from words. But then actually, once you've created that image, I could really imagine that scene. The language was incredible. But once you've created an image, you almost discard the words. So applying it in the case of migrant leaders, we might have generated an image of what our mentees are like. And if they're in a situation which requires an intervention, then we obviously have an impression of what that situation might be. But it's really important that we also catalogue the information that we're told, not just the image that we remember, because images sometimes lie to us.
Yeah, that's a very such a fascinating insight there, Ian. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you for an interesting activity.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, I see there's a comment in the chat. Just let me. Oh, this is from Sami. Yeah. Good exercise. Probably scored lower if I didn't know purpose was to try and remember. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If we're not thinking, I must remember this, and then afterwards you're thinking, oh, what was that you should have remembered? Yeah, absolutely, Sami. Yeah, it's just yeah, it's a hard thing.
I think my main thought was, you're not going to remember everything. So prioritizing what you do remember to write down afterwards feels important.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that can be really hard is if a young person is telling you something, thinking, should I be making notes while the young person is actually telling me this? And that can be a tempting thing to do, isn't it? But I think if we are going to do that, then we really need to be checking that out with the young person, saying, oh, what you're telling me here is really important, and I need to be able to remember it properly. And what might help me to remember is if I can just make a few notes. How do you feel about that? I don't know what your thoughts are as a group about making notes at the point when the young person is telling you about something, or whether you feel that is intrusive or not appropriate.
Personally, Kate, my preference would be to try and make notes straight after the conversation, because I think making notes when a young person is trying to tell you something sensitive might make them feel like you're going to report on them, or it might make most of them feel uncomfortable. And asking them if they're comfortable, if they are uncomfortable, they probably wouldn't say so. So probably the safest thing to do is to make notes straight after.
Yeah. Thank you, Elham. Any other thoughts about that point, or any other reflections that you have from the exercise?
In terms of me, it just, because of the way I work and the way my brain works, I have a terrible memory, and I find if I don't, usually I do a lot of mentoring. I'm usually taking notes while I'm mentoring people, so I'm hoping that they'll get used to me doing that. I would, obviously, if it was something sensitive, I would be listening. I just worry that if I waited till after to take all the notes, that I wouldn't record it in the right way, and I'd forget. So that's my only concern, but I can totally appreciate why it's important to be present in the moment and not look like you're recording something.
Thank you, Julia.
I mean, I definitely take the point there, Julia. Bear in mind that a lot of your mentoring is going to be on the phone or in a Zoom session. So it is kind of possible to take notes, because I can generally see your head and shoulders, most of us. So it is possible to take notes if you're on a Zoom session or on the phone, but it's important not to get distracted while you're doing that. The temptation to press your record button on Zoom or on your phone will be massive, and it's important not to do that, I think. Because that then is intruding into that young person's privacy, and that's not really the way to record. So whilst we're using the terminology of recording, what we mean is a written record.
Yeah, thank you, Fawzia, for clarifying that. Yeah, I think the thing about being present in the moment is a really important thing, isn't it? And I think that for me, I find I have a bad memory as well. And I think it's partly because I've got too much going on in my head all at the same time. Whereas if I can really listen and focus on one thing, and in this case on the young person's account and what they're telling me, then not only is that a better experience for the young person, and but it's also means that I'm actually more likely to be able to remember things, because I'm not sort of 2 steps behind trying to make a record and listen at the same time. I'm really trying to focus and listen, and then as soon as I can afterwards, I'm then making the notes and accepting that perhaps I might not recall everything. So I think it's a hard one, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer about making the notes and the minute or not, but I think we've shared some interesting thoughts and interesting insights about that, and I'd like to thank you again for taking part in that.
I would just add, though, that just from that exercise that we just did with Kate, I got a lot of headline points, and I think that's again something to bear in mind. If you get the headlines, then so for example, I knew that there were more girls than one boy, but I didn't know the ages of the children, although I know Kate mentioned them twice. So it's those headline details that are going to be the most important to record, I think, because then that at least brings the issue to the fore, and it gives you some information to share with me. The finer detail is something that we can explore later on if necessary, and go over it again if we need to.
Thank you, Fawzia. The time is about 5:25, and we need to finish at 6. And the next thing that we're going to do is to move on to work on some case scenarios. I don't know if you would like a very short break first, just to shake your legs a little bit and just kind of give yourself a moment, or whether you want to press on. And I'm in your hands with that, really, or perhaps I should say in Elham and Fawzia's hands about what you'd prefer to do.
I think a couple of minutes for everybody just to shake their legs out or have a comfort break, I think would be useful. But okay. Kate, you tell us when to come back.
Okay, so I make it 26 minutes past 5. Shall we come back at 25 to 6? That gives us just under 10 minutes. We might run over a little tiny bit, and I realise that people might have to dash off at 6, in which case I apologise. But I do think we perhaps need to just give ourselves a rest, because that's been quite an intensive exercise that we've just done then. Yeah. Okay, so let's come back at 25:02. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Hi there, I can see that people are coming back now. Thank you. If you're back and you haven't got your camera on, can you just let me know that you're back? Yeah. So I think we're just waiting for just 1 or 2 more folks to come back.
Okay, just while we're waiting for everybody to come back, a couple of people have had to leave, so I think we're probably only going to need one. We don't need a breakout room. I think we can do the discussion in this main room.
That would be good, wouldn't it? Because that will really help with it'll just save us time in terms of feedback and people leaving rooms and joining rooms and everything else. So let's let's do that. That's a good idea for us. Yeah. Okay, so just another minute and then we'll move on. Yeah. Thank you for staying the course, everybody. I know it's just, I know how busy you all are, and you know, it kind of gets to this time of day, doesn't it? And you think, oh my goodness, I've got things that I need to be doing, really. So really appreciate you sticking with it. I've put a link in the chat for an evaluation form. Hopefully you can all see that. If you just click on that link, then it should take you directly to the form. And honestly, it's like a really quick little thing. So if sometime before you leave today, if you wouldn't mind completing that for us, it would be really, really appreciated. And we're hoping to possibly run some training like this again, and feedback will really help us to make sure that that we make any changes that we need to make. So thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Fawzia, shall I continue? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay. Right then. Right. So this is the point where we're going to be moving on to our case scenarios. So if you have your course books with you, so if you have them on hard copy, then the scenarios are on pages 13. If you have them still as an electronic copy, then obviously if you want to just scroll through your course book, and then you'll be able to see that. And also on the opposite page, and I've also got a slide of this as well, there are the questions that I thought it would be good for us to apply to each scenario. So first of all, just a kind of how it makes us feel, how that scenario makes us feel in our gut, really, what our feelings are and registering our feelings about it. And then how concerned are we? And if we use a scale to help us with that. So 0 means that we're not at all concerned. 5 means that we are extremely concerned. And then the idea then is to think about what are the reasons for us giving the score that we are giving. Why are we extremely concerned, or why is it that we're not at all concerned about that particular situation? And if we feel that the person in the scenario is at risk of harm or abuse, then to specify what exactly it is that we're concerned about in terms of what type of abuse that might be, and what the signs and indicators are that are telling us that it could be that kind of abuse. And then how, as a mentor, you would respond in each of those situations and what you think should happen next. But which I realise that that's quite a lot of questions, but we'll work through them bit by bit, and they are in your course book as well. So can everybody see those scenarios? Can everybody see them? Yeah. Is there anybody who can't see them for whatever reason? Maybe they can't, something's gone wrong with them opening up the course book or anything. So everybody can see them. That's brilliant. Okay. So shall we just work through them from the beginning and see how far we get? Yeah. We'll probably need to wind up at about 5 to 6 just to make sure that we can do final goodbyes just talk about some resources and things like that. So we've got until then. Yeah. Okay. So would somebody like to read out the first scenario for us, the number 1 scenario? Does somebody want to volunteer to read that out for us?
Shall I do the first one?
Thank you, Fawzia. I can't believe people want to hear my voice anymore. It's I've gone on and on endlessly. Yeah. So please do that. Thank you.
Not at all. So your 16-year-old mentee tells you his parents won't let him use his phone because they insist he prioritises his schoolwork and revision. So he's no longer able to have mentoring sessions until after his exams.
Thank you. So first of all, how does that information make you feel? You're this young person's mentor, and he's telling you this. What do you feel about that?
Not particularly concerned, because it doesn't feel like they've taken that completely away from him. They're just prioritizing something right now. But then there is an element of mentoring is value added to his academic journey. So taking that away might not necessarily help him achieve the results that these parents want him to achieve. So it might be worth having a bit of a conversation with him on how his parents can, help his parents feel a little bit differently about mentoring in particular.
Yeah. So are you thinking, Lucia, that you would suggest that you might have that conversation with his parents?
No,
he would have that conversation with his parents?
I think he should have that conversation. I'm not sure if it might be completely inappropriate, but I would probably give availability if his parents would like to get in touch to understand a little bit more how that works. But I would first seek some guidance from the team before I commit to anything, because I might get too involved personally.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Julia's put a comment in the chat as well about I would ask them that I would ask the mentee how they feel about that. So it's do you want to say anything more about that, Julia, or
I mean, I guess it's got to be led by them, and understanding if they feel comfortable with that or if they feel uncomfortable about it, and understanding how I can support them, and trying to ask not leading questions, but questions to understand whether there is a safeguarding issue there or not.
Yeah. At the moment, the sense I'm getting is that you're not thinking that nobody's thinking this is a serious safeguarding issue, and I need to be really worried. That it's something where it's worth trying to explore it a little bit about how it might be from the young person's point of view, and what it might be that actually is causing his parents to be worried about his lack of focus on his schoolwork and stuff. So, but nothing that is actually making people feel really concerned. Yeah. Is there anybody who does feel really concerned? Okay. Yeah. So, in terms of what should happen next, and it sounds as though there's probably a consensus that it's about exploring that little bit with the young person, trying to understand where they're coming from with that, trying to understand where his parents are coming from, and if there is any appropriate room for maneuver and negotiation that might be able to take place between the mentor and his parents. Yeah. Okay. Fawzia, any thoughts that you have about that?
Always. Fortunately, this is the only one of the scenarios that has actually happened, which is why I wanted to put it in. And in fact, the suggestions that Julia made, and also Richard and Lucia, are all things that happened. So in fact, the mentor contacted me just to say, I'm a little bit concerned, I'm just not sure how to handle it. I then actually did follow up with the mentee, and he and I had a telephone conversation. And through that conversation, I was able to gauge, actually, he was okay. He wasn't delighted about it because he wanted to have his phone, but he understood his parents' perspective and was happy to comply with their request and prioritise his exam revision. And so whilst it's not something that I might have done myself, but I didn't necessarily agree with the parents' approach, he was happy with it, and you kind of have to let parents parent in their own way, provided they're not breaking the law, obviously.
Yeah.
So that matter just settled itself down. I then updated the mentor to say, look, it's not an issue. I wouldn't worry about it anymore. And they moved on when the time allowed.
Sure. Thank you, Fawzia. Yes, and Richard's comment in the chat, if people haven't seen that, sort of confirms that was your feeling about that, Richard, as well, that you'd contact the team to see if they were worried someone else might want to reach out to the mentee or the family. And I think that's such a thing always to remember, isn't it, that we're not, even though this is about a relationship between an individual mentor and a mentee, behind the mentor there is the whole team and there is migrant leaders. You're not there on your own with it, and that's always an option to even if you don't think it's a huge safeguarding thing, about saying, oh, this has happened, might be worth someone else reaching out. And for all we know, it might be kind of a bit of a disguised, very polite way for the mentee to be saying, I don't feel that my relationship with my mentor is working that well, and I want to have a nice, comfortable sounding excuse for having a break from it for a bit. And Richard's suggestion there is a kind of very gentle and diplomatic way of potentially testing that out.
My other thought was, I just have no idea whether this happens all the time. It might be that you guys turn around and say, yes, this happens every summer. People doing exams, they always drop out. And I just didn't know that. So that's what I'd come back and ask.
Yeah.
I think it's worth adding, if in doubt, consult. If you're ever in doubt, just come back to us and consult with us. And the other point to bear in mind is that we know our migrant leaders mentees pretty well, and we have a relatively full picture because we've known them typically 2, 3, 4 years since they applied to us, and they tell us their backstory, their background and achievements and challenges. We interview them, we work with them as interns sometimes, put them on internships, work experiences, workshops, so we do get to know them pretty well. And if you consult with us, if you're in doubt, then that would be a good thing.
Thank you, Elham. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, just one more point. It is coming up to exam season, so exams are uppermost in year 13 students' minds, and actually we say we have a flexible mentoring program, and that means that the students should be able to say to their mentors, look, I want to prioritize my revision. I'll touch base with you a couple of times, but actually we'll pick this up in the summer when the exams are over. And I would hope that mentors would understand that and feel that that's something that they're able to do as well.
Thank you. It is 17:47, and I'm a bit concerned that I don't think we're going to get through all these scenarios. So what I'm wondering is whether people would like to, sorry, that's my dog. Yeah, it gets to this time of day and then he decides that it's time for, I'm just going to close the door on him. Hold on a sec again.
Does anybody want to sort of prioritise one or two of the scenarios that they'd like to go through then? Has anybody got one in particular that they want to discuss?
Number 2 has a lot of red flags.
Yeah, I'm going to say number 4 as well.
Number 4, yeah. That sounds, yeah, okay. So would someone like to read out number 4 for us?
I can do that.
Thank you, Bumi.
So your 17-year-old mentee asks if you can meet in a coffee shop close to your offices so that he or she can show you their university personal statements and get your feedback.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so so people who were interested in talking about this particular one, what how does this make you feel? What's your response to this kind of scenario? I think people were thinking, there's a lot of things there to consider. So would anyone like to say something about this?
Well, I think for me, the person wants to meet in person, which is a little bit of a red flag already, because especially if it's we've agreed not to do that. And I would suspect that it's a little bit more than they want to tell me. Either they want to tell me something, or they want to find out more about me as I don't know. Maybe I'm just being overly suspicious. However, I think it's more a case of, we've agreed to do this on Zoom or on phone calls. Why would you like to? I would offer initially, why can't we just do it over Zoom? And then to the responses. And if they insist on meeting in person, I would flag it. I would say, well, let's get permission. Or if I'll ask for permission to do it from Fozia, or maybe even agree to meet somewhere neutral. So not near my offices, but maybe in the migrant leader's office, for example.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting thoughts. Yeah. Anyone else want to say what their thoughts are about that, or what you as a mentor would do if you were in the situation that this mentor is in?
I agree with what he said, because the task is something that can be done over the phone or over email. So if it was something that physically couldn't be done in a coffee shop, then you can sort of understand. But I do agree that there's maybe something else to this. So yeah, the neutral location, like the migrant leaders' offices, would be a good idea, I think.
Thanks very much, Rob. That's really helpful, and I think, yeah, again, very much along similar lines as Bumi was saying, really, as well. Yeah, I mean, my understanding about how migrant leaders works is that it's the contact is online contact, that it is not at all normal procedure for this to be face-to-face contact. So certainly, if you were getting that request, then it would be something that you would need to discuss, even if you were just thinking about saying, okay, well, I'll go and do that. Maybe these are special circumstances, perhaps I should. Don't do it without speaking to Fozia about it. Yeah. Fozia?
Yeah, well, we exactly all the points that everybody has made. We actually ask, and we have this as a kind of FAQ in our mentor's guide, actually, and we do ask that if this scenario comes up, that you do let us know and we discuss the details with you. Generally, and just, this pandemic has been horrible and difficult for many people. But one of the benefits that's come out of it is that you can have meetings like this online and you can share documents. So actually, there is no need to have an in-person meeting to discuss a personal statement. That genuinely could be done online. So it is worth bringing to our attention, because it might require the need to explore the reasons behind that request. We would discourage it, firstly because of the age of the young person, and also because it can be done online. There's no need. It's not something that has to be done in person anymore. I would want the opportunity to explore with that young person why they're making that request.
Fozia, I agree, and I think it's probably worth adding that that separate to this scenario, if your mentee is over 18 years old, there have been some situations where a mentor has offered to invite the mentee to have a tour of their office, meet a few colleagues, and get an impression of the corporate environment. So in those cases, I think we ask you in our mentor's guide to contact us, discuss the circumstances so that we can guide you regarding that.
And what we would say, if a meeting were to go ahead, that it takes place in a public place. So if it's in a coffee shop, then it's in a public coffee shop where other adults are going to be present. And if it's in your offices, again, you have made other adults aware. You probably have your own health and safety policy and safeguarding policy for your organisations. So you apply those, but also make other adults aware, and be in a public area within your offices rather than in a closed office. that's as much protecting yourself as safeguarding the young person.
Thank you very much, Fawzia. Yeah, and I think we talked last time about the very uncommon occasions when sometimes there can be allegations made against a mentee, and although that is really rare, it is still something that that needs to be borne in mind, and the procedures are there to protect both mentee and mentor, really. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, have we got time for one more?
I think we can squeeze in one more, I hope.
Yeah, okay.
I think Lucia talked about scenario 2.
Scenario 2, okay. Brilliant. Would someone like to read out scenario 2 for us?
I can do that, yeah.
Lucia, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Your 16-year-old mentee tells you her parents are taking her back home for the holidays, and her behavior changes from lively and chatty to quiet and guarded after the summer break. She is reluctant to agree to mentoring sessions outside of school or school hours, and is no longer planning to attend university.
Thank you.
Now, this would send me in, all the bells ringing.
Okay. Why would it start ringing bells for you?
Well, the back home is the first thing that feels a bit unsettling, because it doesn't seem to be a really joyful context around there. Like, it's a place I'm going to go and have some fun with, to the point that there is a significant change in the mentee's behavior. So that might suggest, well, sorry for going back to worst case scenario, but environments where they might feel forced to engage in early marriages, or the family has set some expectations, cultural expectations, especially if she's a girl. So there might be some expectations how she should be at this age. And the fact that she's giving up university, it seems to me like a big breach of her freedom to choose who she wants to be and what she wants to do in life. So, yeah, I would be really, really concerned about this.
Yeah, thank you, Lucia. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I can see other people nodding. Yeah, as well. Yeah, so this is one where there are concerns, where we might hypothesize, we don't know, but we might hypothesize that this is a young person who's been put in a situation where they might be subjected to forced marriage, and where they're not able to make their own decisions about these things. Yeah, so clearly very concerning. So thoughts on what you would be wanting to do about this situation and about your concerns?
I would not encourage, because it might be really difficult to talk about this, but obviously she has initiated the conversation to a certain degree. So maybe just make her feel comfortable that she can disclose as much as she feels comfortable with. And then definitely go back to migrant leaders with a record of the conversation, and really thinking about how we can help her.
Yeah.
I think it's worth adding that I think it's useful to look at the wider context and the wider signals as well. Often some signs of abuse, coercive behaviors, control, and even radicalization, there are some wider signs of that. For example, is the person who's doing this isolating them from their friends, isolating them from their communication methods, controlling where they go and don't go, controlling their finances. So there are certain indicators in my mind of abuse, control, and even radicalization, that if you look for those clues in what the mentee is telling you, should make you realize on a scale of 0 to 5 how concerning this is. And of course, consult with us at Migrant Leaders.
Sure. And I guess, yes, remember that it's not for you to have to decide that there's definitely anything like this going on. It is for you to be, as Lucia is, alarmed about it, and and not just say, oh, well, it's none of my business. I'm just going to keep quiet about it. That would just be totally the wrong thing to do in this situation. So yeah, okay, brilliant. I think probably we should leave those scenarios there. I'm sorry we haven't had more time for scenarios, because it is really interesting and helpful to talk about these, but I'm just aware of people having to leave the session and not wanting to encroach on your time, and we do need to do a little bit of finishing off. So with your permission, shall we move on? Okay, yeah. Okay, well, I'm just going to share my screen for a last little bit now. Yes, so in terms of resources and support and questions that you might have, there are obviously some amazing resources that migrant leaders produce themselves, and that I'm aware that if you had a concern, then the team would be very much wanting to try and, if necessary, seek further support and whatever it was that needed to happen about that. In your course book, if you look in your course book as well, on page 17, you'll see that there are links there for a whole load of different resources that might be useful to you in various different ways. The ones at the bottom where it says useful support organisations are ones that perhaps a little bit more specific to the work of migrant leaders. The others are more sort of general safeguarding information. So I don't know if you also, anybody in the group is aware of any useful resources or sources of information that you think it's worth making other people aware about, or if perhaps Fawzia's got and Elham have some thoughts about what they would want to say about resources and support that migrant leaders provides. Any thoughts from anybody?
I think that list is a very comprehensive list, actually, Kate. So thank you very much for that. And that's really handy to have accessible as well. Everybody's got a copy of the course book. In terms of resources that we provide, I mean, we in our executive team are a resource for you. So we're always here. If you need to speak to us or run any concerns by us, then by all means get in touch. We also have our mentors guide, which gives really good expectations in terms of boundaries. I'm forgetting my words now, sort of what we expect of you and where guidelines in terms of expectations of behaviour and code of practice. That's what I was trying to think of. And then we also have our safeguarding policy, of course, and the incident report form, which again are downloadable from our website. So you should always be able to get hold of those if you need to.
Thank you very much, Fawzia. Yeah. Elham, did you want to add anything about resources and support or anything like that?
No, I think Fawzia very nicely listed the resources on our website, and I can't reiterate enough, if in doubt, consult us. That is probably the biggest thing that is going to ensure you feeling supported and doing the right thing. And timeliness. Don't sit on the information. Report it to us immediately, because with these things, timeliness is very important.
Yes, absolutely. I would really echo that. And I think sometimes, even though in general terms, you know that you're not on your own, you know the team is there, what I sometimes find myself doing is, in the moment when I'm faced with this issue, that goes out of my head a bit, and I think, I've got to sort this, and I forget that actually the team is there. So it's remembering that, well, for me, it's like remembering that at the time that I should be remembering it, really. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're pretty much at the end there. Does anyone have any other questions that they want to ask or raise before we close? As I say, these you will get all the slides, so they'll be in PDF form. but Fawzia will send those out to you, so you will have all of those. And I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for, as I say, for being involved in this, and a huge thanks to Fawzia and to Elham for allowing us to meet with you and do these sessions with you. It's such a pleasure to be involved with an organisation such as yourselves, and you do fantastic work. So all the very best.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you.